what Yara was saying, is everybody borrows money at one time or another. And I think the conversation we aren't having is like, why have we accepted so much this mentality in the United States? And I don't know that it's, you know, the financial system has power, but I think we give it that power by making an assumption that you have to live in this debt cycle. And that's not necessarily the way that our economy has to thrive. And something that we probably should touch on is maybe can we shift towards a different lifestyle? Like, is it okay to live your life, you know, without a credit card? You know, can we still be as prosperous or consider ourselves as prosperous if we don't have 5 credit cards in our wallet? You know, so that's like a conversation people want to.
That's fundamental conversation about. You're questioning the idea of capitalism because is founded on the idea of borrowing and investing for the long term.
And creating utility, the need for new things. And, I mean, I think that's a really provocative point. But you're right, systemically. I mean, imagine if the population did that. I mean, imagine if after 9/11, no one traveled, no one spent money long enough. I mean, it would devastate the economy. And so we're sort of in this, you know, always ratcheting upward in terms of economic activity.
But do we have to borrow to do that? You know, like, if my ticket is $300, can I just spend $300? Do I have to put it on a credit card and then, you know, subsequently end up paying maybe $400 or $500 for that same thing? Because the airline still gets their $300. So we're still sustaining that industry. The only thing that would, you know, obviously have to change is those credit systems. And can't we, you know, shift away from that and still sustain our economy? Because we're still buying the products that we're buying.
Well, I see the credit crisis as the individual credit problems as more indicative of the collapse of wages. The people that are making up the difference in the loss of wages by charging things that they otherwise wouldn't charge. So as a part of it, I can't say how much.
And Scott and Jay,
you mentioned something that maybe you could clarify for me too. They said in one of the videos that if you took that idea to a national level and there was no national debt, that then we would lose monetary policy, monetary control. Can you explain a little bit how that works?
I remember exactly that statement. I guess that's one of those arguments that's completely hypothetical because monetary policy is the buying and selling of securities, and that is in reaction to a deficit or a surplus. And what they're saying is that if there wasn't a deficit, there would be no need for monetary policy. And what they would say is specifically they were talking about the federal funds rate, which is the open market operation which they're talking about. That's the primary instrument for monetary policy. And what they said though is if there wasn't a deficit or a surplus, there wouldn't be a need to have that kind of monetary policy. They'd have to go to other means. So that would be the reserve requirement, which would mean that the banks would have to, the rates that they loan at would change, and that's not a desirable monetary policy. So I think that's the argument that he was talking about, but I mean, first of all, it's impossible to even, I mean, that's one of those examples where you're taking this abstract, like, economic concept and it has no practical application whatsoever because the fact to live in a society without a deficit or surplus is never going to exist.
You want to have that balance and register to do that. It's kind of sorry, Jay, how you.
This is a sort of naive follow-up question. Are there significant economies in the world that don't operate in debt? I mean, I'm trying to think. I don't know. Like, does Germany have a national debt? Does, you know?
That's in the Peterson. I mean, I was looking for that before. There is. It's in one of the books that shows relative levels of debt.
One of the textbooks too.
Or maybe it's in the maybe it's in one. I just looked at it last night that shows relative levels of debt, and Germany is actually worse off than we are. Belgium is worse than we are.
Sweden is doing well.
Yeah,
Yes,
I mean,
Sweden
like places like
is doing
Norway
really
sure,
well.
are doing well.
Some of the populations up the west side.
Well, right.
And what?
They also have no military.
And they have enough,
Right.
and they have as much oil as Ukraine. I mean, I'm talking about, like, are there, I mean, I don't know, I'm just wondering, like, I don't know what a comparable, there's no comparable country, but like, you know, what's China's national debt? What's Australia's national debt? What's Canada's national debt? I don't know why that just
question
It's in
from
Krugman,
the
because that's what I
is
was
like,
last looking.
what is their monetary
Yeah.
policy? You know,
If I didn't
they're
have
not
this camera in front of my face, I
That's a
would
very
look
interesting
for
thing
it.
about, other countries have different monetary policy methods. And that's interesting too. The Federal Reserve has certain powers and methods to implement their monetary policy. Essentially, what the monetary policy does is it changes the price of money.
Correct.
And in other countries, they can fix it. And more command economies, they often do that. They don't even let the market determine what the price of money is. Here in the United States, we actually use these, these influences, or we create these little triggers, like interest rates, to affect it. But in other countries, it's fixed.
Okay.
Was the Bank of England, they talk about that, they fixed the interest rate at 2.5%.
At the bottom.
They said that the Fed doesn't have a strict rule to follow.
Right.
We typically keep interest rates, inflation rates between, I think it's inflation between 2 and 3, but there's no like hard and fast goal for that.
Then the Federal Reserve does tell the banks to say, we're going to give everybody 5%.
Right, but they do in some countries, like.
Right, right. With the U.S. doesn't do that.
You could actually go to the Federal Reserve, because the actual market operations occur in New York City, and you can go onto the floor, and they have these guys who are, and mostly guys, which is another important thing we should talk about here, who are like in their 30s, have their master's degrees in economics, and they're up there, and they actually conduct open market operations. They buy and sell bonds, and it's a competitive market. So when you hear about these open market operations, it's not like the U.S. is favored over any other buyer or seller. And their job is to search out the best deal that would most benefit the U.S. government, and they actually make these transactions electronically. It's happening all the time. You could, it's on this one floor, it's like rooms like the size of this place, and that's where all the monetary policy actually gets.
Well, the open market operation.
Open market operation,
Yeah,
And
but not the interest rate, so that's, but the Federal Reserve, they make that.
But that's the primary rate. That's
Right.
the one that is most influential on the economy.
How does, well, I guess if in the summation activity, we'll talk about things we feel like we need to understand. Do I need to understand short selling and how that affects the value of the dollar or the pound, or, I mean, is a description.